Hello, ladies and
Hello,
gentlemen,
everybody.
and welcome
Welcome to
back
another
to
episode of Inside Movies Galore. I'm your host, Dustin, and I'm here with Dave,
Hello.
Kabuki Jake,
Hi.
who I always call Bayou Jack and can't stop, and Septum Sins, also known as Brandon.
Ew.
Eh, the fan man.
Yeah.
Well, today we're here with, because it's, pick the movie week for the cast here. We're going with my pick this week, which is Dario Argento's 1985 Phenomena, which I think I picked pretty much just on the music. So I have here the Blood and Black Wax book about horror soundtracks, and I'm going to use the synopsis that they gave. So, Phenomena sees Dario Argento playing with several styles and plot threads at once. The 1985 film is part murder mystery, part supernatural horror, part coming-of-age story, even part insect documentary at times, all told with the director's zeal for moving camera, showcasing screaming victims and fetishizing shimmering blades piercing all manner of flesh. Depending on which version of the film you've seen, one 16 minutes, one 10 minutes, or the 83-minute US version, retitled Creepers, it has varying levels of coherency. And it has bugs. A whole lot of bugs. So we're going to
So true.
get right into the point here. So what version did you guys see?
The 110-minute one.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah, I have the Synapse Steelbook, which comes with all three cuts, and so I was able to watch all three cuts. Although, for some reason, I think I got a bad disc because my 116-minute cut had a lot of really bad the image pixelated, and then the disc just stopped working when it would get to a specific point.
Blu-rays can do that if you get a bad one.
Yeah, it was really aggravating. So I went and tried to get a replacement.
Because that extra 6 minutes was just too much.
Well, it kind of depends. I watched all three.
They couldn't quite make the cut.
Yeah, needless to say, we're gonna spoil kind of the fun parts of this movie. So if you haven't seen it, see it. I mean, otherwise, we'll try to keep it not too crazy. So, kick back and have a good time.
Yeah.
So let's go off into our little impressions. So my first time seeing Phenomena was actually this winter. So as a horror collector, I sometimes buy stuff just if I see it lying around. And I happened to run into the really, really expensive Aero Steelbook for this at a third of what it was online. And so I was like, well, that's a lot, but okay. So I bought it, and I ended up really loving it. I went out and bought the vinyl almost right away. I think I bought the movie because the vinyl itself looked so cool, and I fell in love with it pretty quickly. So it was a very strange movie, but the music really makes it. So let's move on. Who wants to go next?
I suppose I'll go. My experience with it was I actually saw this years ago in bits and pieces, and then when Anchor Bay came out with the five movie set with a steelbook on DVD, mind you, not Blu-ray. They did a pretty definitive collection of Dario Argento films on there. Well, in any case, I then saw it in its full extent of what I could see, and I actually love the music. I like that it's kind of like a murder mystery and a supernatural thing at the same time. I mean, I cannot imagine I saw as many bugs in an Italian film that and it was just so weird. It was a weird concoction of apes and Jennifer Connelly, which she was very young in here. She's
just 14, yeah.
Caught my eye, and later in the Labyrinth. So yeah, definitely was a cool experience watching it again. I mean, you can't miss out on seeing the film in its full texture.
Madness.
Definitely some interesting camera movements there. So, anyone else?
All right. Well, I guess I'll go. Believe it or not, this was actually not only my first time seeing this film. This is the first film I've seen by Dario Argento. So that was.
Welcome aboard.
Well, that was the one. That was like the one episode I missed since I've joined, because I couldn't make it for that one. So yeah, I was interested to see something. You know, I know the guy by name. Unfortunately, the reputation had me think there's very few of the films I'm likely to love. But I was intrigued by this one, and I will agree, the music stood out to me as one of the great parts of it. I've long been a fan of Jennifer Connelly, so definitely she had the skill to make an interesting lead. Donald Pleasance is always fun. I mean, he was definitely fun in this. So there was plenty there that was good. It was only a few moments that I would rather have not seen. So on balance, decent first impression.
Oh, well, this is actually my first time watching. Well, I guess not first time considering all things. The fact that I've watched it 3 times over the past week. But this is but not my first experience with Argento, at least. Because I have watched, I did watch Deep Red and that. But it came across very differently than Deep Red did. I think, am I getting the name right, or am I butchering the name?
Deep Red or
that
Deep
right?
Red? Tenebrae, which I always pronounce wrong.
But yeah, it's got a lot of similarities to it. I remember that, but it definitely flowed much better, and I was much more relieved because I wasn't as happy with that movie. So I was thinking to myself, "Oh my goodness, there's going to be another long haul." So I was somewhat pleasantly surprised, and though not as in depth or slightly confusing, I did like the U.S. cut the best.
Yeah, there's a substantial difference between the different cuts of this. In particular, the U.S. cut is like almost a half hour shorter.
Right.
And there's kind of a lot missing from it. Although I did kind of like, when it comes to the U.S. cut, I did kind of like how it was more like focused and to the point. It's like, it's basically just like the story beats that you need and pretty much nothing else, which did hurt it in some reviews because people were like, wow, this just kind of happens. And it's like, well, it's because they cut out like 10 minutes of like explanation and setup, in this one part alone.
Which is why I think the 110 minute cut is a little bit more complete for those for those who want a little bit more, And I have never seen the full uncut yet, so I don't know what the difference is between the 110 and the 116.
It's largely like extra time on scenes. Additional dialogue. I was reading that the 27 minutes that were cut for the Creepers version, almost all of it came from the first hour of the movie.
Right.
So that's why it just seems to be, it's like, oh, Jennifer Connelly arrives in, what is this, Switzerland? Right. Oh, surprise, murder.
Right.
So there's a lot of in between that they passed on.
Did they keep that opening scene with the first murder, or was that
with the tourist? Yes,
right.
So that's how the movie opens each time.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I only did the 110-minute as well, and I think it flowed pretty well as a movie. I mean, it was a little slow at the beginning, but I mean, I appreciate character development and time spent on setting things up. I don't really care if a movie is pure plot. I prefer that it's not usually. But I know in America, it's usually plot, action.
It's
You know.
in America, we must know what's going on at any given point in time.
Well,
we're screwed.
Unlike a lot of other Argento movies, this had a fairly coherent plot to it, despite that description. I mean, there's a lot of bizarre stuff in here. I mean, we have telekinetic powers involving insects. We have chimps with razor blades. We have Donald Pleasance in a chair. Okay, yes, I guess that's not that weird, but yeah, we've got like creature babies. Like it's mania.
And then like you got the like the Mean Girls school is kind of involved there, and with the super bitch as their headmistress, and all kinds of fun stuff.
All the rich kids in the private schools.
So
right.
As we slightly lose the plot. So anyway, the actual plot, like when you describe it, is
right.
So a series of murders have been happening around the school over the last 8 months, and Jennifer Connelly's character comes to the school like as a new student, and so she has this strange ability to kind of interact with insects. Like insects are like drawn to her, and she can kind of make them do stuff. And so she uses this power to try and like catch the murderer.
In a sense, she kind of reminds me of like Firestarter in a sense, because she's got this like supernatural power that she can control, and except Firestarter, she could not control her power. Whereas this this one had Jennifer Connelly could definitely control her powers, definitely to a certain degree.
To an extent, yeah. You could tell that she could. She didn't seem to understand how it worked, but she knew that it worked. So there's a scene where like all the classmates, like they overhear. It's like the headmistress breaks into her room and is like reading letters that she's written to her dad. It's like, I hate it at the school, but I found out I can control insects. And all the schoolers are like laughing at her. It's like, oh, look at me, I'm a spider. It's basically just like stupid insults. And
actually,
kind of, like, yeah.
Well, I was going to say that scene there. Dave had brought up something that I thought when I was watching the film, which that scene there reminded me of another Stephen King story, Carrie. I was reminded very much of Carrie being tormented by her classmates and everything.
Oh yeah.
In that, yeah.
It was. I still haven't seen Carrie, but I've seen that clip, and yeah, I can see that. Like it ends with, she's looking in their direction and saying, I love you all. And the girls are still just kind of like laughing at her, like not understanding what's going on. And they turn around and like the windows behind them have just gone black with a cloud of flies.
It's the birds, but flies instead of birds.
There's even some fun dialogue afterward. It's like they say in the Bible, Satan is Lord of the Flies. That's her, the Lady of the Flies. Okay. Lady of the Flies. I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
One parallel I saw with Deep Red plot-wise was the whole mystery aspect, sort of that murder mystery going on.
Well, it's a giallo. I mean, that's the entire point. This just happened to have
This one actually had supernatural elements. I don't think Deep Red had any supernatural elements.
Deep Red didn't. Neither did Tenebrae or the Bird with the Crystal Plumage. But I sort of made the joke on Twitter. It's like, am I the only person who has trouble telling those apart? Because they're very similar.
Tenebrae is actually part of the Mother of Tears trilogy, if I remember correctly. Because it goes Suspiria, Tenebrae, and a Mother of Tears.
No, it's Inferno. It's Inferno, Mother of Tears, Suspiria. Isn't it? I'm pretty sure it's Inferno, not Tenebrae.
Oh, I wouldn't know. I haven't seen any of
them. Yeah, I wouldn't know either.
Yell it up on Twitter at the Crypt of Horror. Or I66, I think is. I'm not actually sure how to find me. I'll be in the mask. It's easy.
So back to the basics. Of course, you've got the the part where Donald Pleasance comes in is he's this professor, I believe it is,
he's a wheelchair-bound etymologist.
right,
Studies insects.
right, and he's basically he basically is consulted at the early part of it by the police, and then the young lady Jennifer ends up running into him and she comes to him for help, and they have all these discussions, and I'm sure a lot of that was probably what got cut. I don't know. I like those scenes,
There were a few things that got cut that were very defining that could have been utilized later character-wise.
Right.
It made a lot more sense.
So in those scenes, Jennifer is talking with with Donald Pleasance's character about, it's like, how does this work? He was noticing that, you really do seem to have some kind of power over them, because all the bugs in the professor's tanks are just kind of like up against the glass. It's like trying to get close to her.
Right. Well, she's like really flustered and she doesn't know she wants to tell him because everyone else thinks she's crazy. And all the bugs are all, and then as soon as she tells them, they're all like, they all chill, they all calm down because it's like, yeah. And he notices that and he's like, whoa. So I thought that was kind of a fun scene, actually. Very interesting.
Yeah, like all that stuff was good. And then, of course, we can't forget the important part. So I just almost called him Dr. Loomis. Like, it's so hard. I've got his character name here, or at least I'm supposed to. Thanks for crashing on me, IMDb. Well,
Which character?
Donald Pleasance's character, I think it's Dr. John something?
John McGregor.
John McGregor. Okay, I was close. So Dr. John McGregor, he has a helper monkey, which is this chimpanzee. Normally, you don't have a chimpanzee as a helper animal. You have like a capuchin or something. But, that just adds a lot more of a weird fun factor to this movie. It's like, oh yeah, there's this chimp. And apparently the chimp was really difficult, like on the set and kind of scary, and might have even bitten Jennifer Connelly and sent her to the hospital. It's kind of a rumor of the whole thing. But the movie was even cooler. Like the chimp, it's like, yeah, we're doing this too. So what'd you guys think of that?
The chimp?
Yeah.
It was an interesting touch.
I actually believe that was one of the subtleties that was cut out of Creepers, was a lot of the play to the chimp finding and hiding his scalpel at the beginning, and where it came to play in the end.
Well, the chimp seemed to have a knack for just finding stuff in the trash, because that's sort of weird. So early on, there's a scene where I keep trying to say the monkey. Early, there's a scene where the chimp is playing with a scalpel, and Dr. John is like, where did you get that? Outside? Like, and who put it outside? You did. And it's clearly a scalpel. Much later in the film, the chimpanzee goes to a trash can and pulls out like a straight razor, like a completely different thing that we haven't seen it before. So it's just like, does this chimpanzee just know where to find like dangerous shit? Like the couple in American Werewolf. I know where you can get a gun. Smiling.
Well, he's definitely a more violent chimpanzee than we're used to.
Well, I think it was in the storyline, it was a female chimpanzee. But, well, he has a reason. So, well, anyway, so it was like, I was about to call her character Jennifer, and it's like, wait a minute, no, it's the actress. And then I double checked the name. It's like her character's name is Jennifer. That must have just made things easier on the set. So, well, as Jennifer is at this school and like discovering like that she has this ability to this rapport with insects, so more of the murders happen. Like at one point, her roommate is one of the killer's victims, and after that, her and Dr. John, start thinking of how they can use her power to like hunt the murderer. And they settle on, it's like, oh, this particular species of corpse fly knows where to find bodies. So, like, a firefly leads her to a clue, like, out of her bedroom one night. Like,
Right.
she follows it to this glove that the killer, like, lost at one of the scenes, and it's, like, covered in maggots. So, the thing with this killer is he likes to stay close to the bodies and, like, I don't know what he does with them, but he touches them and he gets, like, the maggots on him. And so there's a scene where she gets an adult fly of the maggots and just kind of takes it out into the country to see where it goes. And she actually she doesn't find like the lair, but she does find the house where some of the bodies are being kept. And so what do you guys feel about like the progression of how the story moves along?
Well, like I said, I thought it moved pretty smoothly for the most part. I mean,
yeah, everything makes sense. Like, what did you think about that concept itself of using like that supernatural connection with insects to be like, hey, you know, we can use these to go find?
I thought that was kind of a cool touch.
I thought so. I thought so as well. I mean, I like the touch of the firefly. Telling her, follow me to this glove, you know, that kind of thing, and something like that. And then it's interesting how the larva is very much close to the being almost the same bug as or having a more profound sounding name like the bug that's in Silence of the Lambs, the death's head moth, whereas in here the larva is called the destroyer. You know,
oh, it was like the sarcophagus fly or something.
Yeah,
it's still pretty interesting dynamics. So I wonder if, well, no, I think Silence of the Lambs probably already existed, but it's kind of a fun parallel. It's actually sort of where Argento got the idea for this. Like, he had heard about some of those crime scene investigators using insects to solve crimes, and he was like, oh, and that's kind of...
Oh, actually, I didn't really feel the Silence of the Lambs connection, but now that you mention it, or Dave mentions it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. But one thing that was going through my mind was I did recently complete watching What I Own of the show CSI, and if you remember anything of that show, Gil Grissom was obsessed with etymology. He was and he loved using bugs to solve crimes. And so I was sitting there, especially when McGregor was saying anything scientific-ish. I couldn't help but thinking, like, I could see Grissom watching this and picking it apart. That was something that definitely I was on my mind with this. Yeah.
Well, they weren't that bad on the science, except for stuff like, you know, it is well known that insects are telepathic. It's like, no, what?
The insects are what?
Donald Pleasance's character at one point actually says insects are well known to be telepathic.
Oh yeah, right. That's up there with talking about TV with spurious science. That's up there with that episode of House where he said coral snakes were common in New Jersey.
That's...
I had to face palm for that one. Or up there with the Robinson Crusoe on Mars. Water is where you find it.
Well, I think that's pretty straightforward, to tell you the truth.
That one's not inaccurate. It's just like...
Because water is really where you find it.
Yes, it is. It may not be for long, but...
Anyway, after that, the killer comes for poor Dr. John. And it's a fairly intense scene where the killer breaks into his house and the chimp is trapped outside, and the chimp is just like throwing a fit, like trying to warn. I'm just gonna call him
Right.
Dr. Loomis. I'm so sorry, guys. He's trying to warn Dr. Loomis, and he's like, "What's going on?" It's like, "Oh, you locked yourself out." Wait, who's there? And it's like, "Oh man."
He did have a little bit of a Loomis feel, didn't he?
Well, he is. He does look like he is Dr. Loomis. I mean,
Well, yeah.
you can't not do it.
I gotta say though, the more you call him Dr. John, the more I'm thinking it'd be interesting if that had been part of the soundtrack.
Dr. McGregor.
Dr. McGregor. Okay, I gotta remember that now. Oh my god, just do it. Just do it right. Why is it so hard? Anyway, what do you guys think of the killer's weapon? It's like a pole. It's like a collapsible pole arm. It's basically just like a knife. It's basically just like a spear,
Mm-hmm.
like a lance.
Don't go through the McGregor patch again.
Where the hell did they get that? You know?
That was an interesting device. Yes.
Like, I mean,
They Friday the 13th where he used the spear.
he uses a spear in, I think almost all of the early ones. There's a spear in 1, 2, I think 3. There's the gate. There's the fence post in 6. There's a lot of spearing in F-13th.
I was going to say, because it's not the first time I've seen that type of. I mean, maybe not the one where you kind of piece it together as you go, but using a pole arm like that. But of course, there's a reason for the pole arm being used.
It's the Swiss. They have pikemen. Those are their cops, just pikemen.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a part of the Swiss Army.
Collapsible 6-foot bayonet.
That'd be a heck of a Swiss Army knife.
Well,
They don't play with those things.
Wasn't there a scene where it was like they were extending it just a little bit with pieces?
Yeah, that's so one of the early killings, like this girl turns a corner and she sees what we assume is the killer, and she like screams and starts running, and then we see like the killer's hand like starting to screw like this big like knife projection, this big knife onto like a metal bar with like screws on it.
Mm-hmm.
So we see him, it's like, oh, that thing is like whatever their murder weapon is, it's like collapsible. Like we see it in the finale of the movie, and it is indeed just like it's like a lance. Almost like just like a long thing with a fairly big blade at the tip,
like the spear of a bayonet.
Yeah, basically just on a long pole arm. We keep calling it. It looks like Shao Kahn's lance from Mortal Kombat 11. If you guys are familiar with that, listening at home.
You can see one of those German punks that Jennifer meets early on, running up against that guy, and then they'll like pull a little switchblade out or something. He'd be like, "You call that a knife?"
That's a spoon. You're right.
But one thing that I don't think anyone's mentioned plot-wise is that Jennifer has been having she sleepwalks and has been having these weird visions in sleepwalking. And I thought that was kind of an odd little. They kind of, I guess that was like the forerunner to her full-blown telepathy, sort of.
Yeah, when she sleepwalks, she murders. Although it's kind of ambiguous in a few scenes if she's actually there or if she's just like seeing it like in her sleep. Like I think she's actually there because they show her like interacting with the environment.
Right.
Almost like dream premonitions or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that did get reflected, at least in not in Creepers, but in the 110 Minute, which was the area, that hallway that she's walking in. That actually did get reflected later in the movie. I think it's like an asylum, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and one of the scenes that was cut was her getting like an EEG at the hospital. It's like, we're going to figure out why you sleepwalk. Like, that entire scene was cut for the Creepers version.
Yeah, and then that old doctor looking at her and saying, because sleepwalking is often a forerunner to schizophrenia, which is like, that seemed kind of spurious too, I thought.
Wow, shade.
Yeah.
I've worked in the field and I've never heard that before.
Evidently, everything under the sun can cause schizophrenia.
Right.
I mean, in the 80s, they didn't know. I don't
As
know.
she snores, it must be a forerunner to schizophrenia.
What do you think, mental
Right.
health person?
If you didn't act like us, you must have schizophrenia.
Yeah.
What's your medical professional take on this here, Septum?
No.
Oh, she does not have schizophrenia?
Well, keep in mind that what year was this thing?
85?
Yeah,
Probably filmed in 84, 83.
in those days, a lot of the definitions were very different. You had a very different diagnostics manual. Homosexuality was considered a mental illness back in those days. And the way that and schizophrenia was a term in horror movies, I noticed that's thrown around of this person is mentally ill, they're schizophrenic. And a lot of times it was in the place of multiple personality disorder, which is a very different disorder. But with schizophrenia, it's that absence of reality, and that's probably where they're trying to concentrate. Well, she's not in reality; she's in another world. She's not here with us. Well, I'm guessing that's where they're going with it.
And there are some doctors in the medical field that actually believe that there is no such thing as a multiple personality disorder. It's all in the mind.
It's a personality disorder because it's usually developed as a way of suppressing bad memories and events, which very traumatic.
Well, she had a few of those in this one.
Oh yeah. Well, kind of moving on to our finale. So after Dr. McGregor's murder, she's like, fuck this, I want to go home. And things kind of don't quite work out, and she ends up in the killer's lair. So we get a bit of a surprise reveal. So,
well, the killer has been watching her since the get-go. If you notice, there is always someone watching. We don't see who it is, but we imagine that it's the killer.
Yeah, and when she first arrives at the school, she's welcomed by Frau Bruckner, which it's not actually made. I'm not actually sure what her job at the school is, because there's the headmistress who is very clearly a different person, but I don't know what Frau Bruckner actually does at the school. Like, does she teach? Like, it's never. I don't think they actually make it clear.
And on the
public relations,
I don't think this has been mentioned. Apparently, there's an investigator who was looking into the murders that are happening.
Yeah, there's a cop who's investigating the murders too.
Yeah.
I
have to ask, because again, associations with other things. Did anyone else hear the name Frau Bruckner and think something else entirely?
I thought of Bruckner from Turok Evolution on GameCube.
It's like
I could.
Only person who knows that game.
Because I heard I think I actually probably heard when they said her name. I think I probably actually heard Frau Bruckner. So that gave me a whole different association for the character. A little bit of young Frankenstein there.
So Jennifer ends up it's like, oh, I'll stay with Frau Bruckner and I'll be safe there. And she's looking around her house, and she's all the mirrors are covered up, and it's like, oh yeah, it's for my son. Like, he just can't stand the sight of himself. It's like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. And she goes to use the bathroom, and the corpse maggots are like all over the towels, meaning the killer's been handling them. And Frau Bruckner, surprise! Guess who's the killer? So she attacks Jennifer, knocks her out. Then the inspector shows up, and we don't see exactly what she does to him, but we just hear like screaming, and then like a few minutes later, we see him like chained up in the basement. So
I kind of see a lot of parallels to this from the original Friday the 13th, which To me, oddly enough, out of the movies, I thought that one was the most expertly written of the ones. Just a
Probably.
lot of similarities. You have a woman who, of course, is willing to murder in order to protect her own son. But in this case, the son is still alive instead of dead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so after Jennifer manages to escape briefly, and she falls into kind of this sort of hole in the floor, and she ends up in the basement where she's surprised by the inspector, who's like covered in blood and chained up to the wall, and he's trying to calm her down, but she's just like not having it, and she falls into what's basically like a corpse pit,
Yeah.
where all of the victims have been. The police
Not just that, but I
haven't
think it was
really
also
been
the
found by the
sewage.
police. Like the police found the first victim's head, and that was it. Like the killer has been stashing the bodies just like in this like water-filled pit.
Well, it's not just water. I think it was whatever it was, wherever the toilet water went.
It was pretty gross. It was
Yeah.
basically
It was very gross.
it was basically just like it was just like a decay pit. Like there were
Yeah.
lots of skeletons and decomposing bodies in there.
Yeah.
And it's also the source of the maggots too, which were all over that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then Furbreckner shows up and is basically trying to like drown Jennifer like in the goop. The inspector gets like one last heroic moment. Like he's able to free himself from the chains and seems to take Frau Bruckner out. So Jennifer runs off, and she finds the son sort of crying in the corner, and she's like, you don't have to be afraid of your mom. It's okay. And like the child turns around, and the child is hideously deformed, and has the maggots all over him. So this movie actually has two killers. So a big reveal. So all the girls were killed by the son, and the professor was killed by his mother to help cover up her son's crimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get a sort of implausible chase. Like Jennifer is able to run from the house. She gets onto a boat and tries to start it. So she starts to escape in a boat, and then this kid just jumps into the boat. Like he's got like his lance thing with him. And he's poking at her. And then what do you guys think of how that ended? So if somebody else besides me describe it.
I thought that was kind of a brilliant scene for a moment, because you have to believe that this ugly child is a killer in a sense, because he has that lance in his hand, and that he's poking at her, that he pokes the motor instead, of course.
Yeah.
But, he's obviously got more strength in him than a any mortal child should.
And if you follow the plot too, he's actually supposed to be 15. He's just very stunted. So he has like a defect where he's basically like missing his lips, and his like teeth have developed like really nastily.
And his face is entirely decayed.
Like his face is basically just rotting. Like he's a pretty gross looking dude.
He's already a corpse in the head.
And like in that scene, you get a sense of how it's like, because all of the girls that have been killed have been like 13, 14-year-olds, and it's like, oh, okay, I can easily see from the way we see them killed, like the little bit that we do see of them just getting like stabbed by this thing. It's like, okay, we can perfectly buy that this guy did all of that. Like they sell it in just that like short scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then in like a moment of duress, like she screams, and the cloud of flies comes down from the moon and like eats the killer's face. Like that was so epic.
That was epic. I mean, the swarm of either wasps or bees or whatever.
They were the corpses.
They didn't look like flies.
They were flies.
That's what I was thinking.
The focus was the flies.
Right.
So it's, I don't know. It like I say, it kind of reminded me a lot of a Friday the 13th vibe. where you've got Jason and his mother killing people.
It really did get there at the end, yeah. Dumb.
Yeah.
It also helps with
I'm
the
kind of
supernatural.
reminded.
Whoa.
I'm kind of reminded of films like The Boy, where he lives inside the walls and he just never grows up entirely. It's just a little boy.
Huh.
I would like that, yeah. What was
Or
your
People
pick?
Under the Stairs. There's a good one like that.
Yeah, I would have to say that kind of reminds me of this kind of a film. So there are definitely films done in this kind of a genre.
This kind of like plot motif. What were you about to say, Jake?
Was I? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Everybody, like,
I think we all kind of did start at once, didn't we?
Yeah.
Well, I was just this was just kind of an aside, but he was talking. Dave was talking about bees and wasps. There was that notable scene early on with the bee, and I thought that was kind of interesting because he had like Jennifer is like, oh, a bee, and the other two in the car are just flipping out like,
Oh my God,
it's a bee! Oh my God! Oh, what's going to kill us all? It's like, and she's just sitting there. And they're like, no, don't touch it, and she's like, it's a bee. It's
like,
you know.
and it's like
And I'm sitting there going, sadly, that part was really not that far-fetched or supernatural at all. You do have people who are very good at handling bees, and then you get the people that just are just weird. Like some phobias, people get weird with their phobias sometimes.
I know. I just saw on America's Funniest funniest videos or whatever. There was a guy who got tripped out because a frog came out of the toilet. I was like, really?
Just frog.
Well, you wouldn't necessarily expect one to come out of your toilet.
Yeah, but still, I mean, I wouldn't trip out over a frog.
Florida, I don't know.
Well,
right.
I mean, a lot of us can identify with a bee getting in your car, and I mean, for me, of course, I've had very traumatic experience with bees growing up. I grew up in the country, which I got to run into them lots of times, so I've gotten very used to the feeling of getting stung, and I can understand that feeling of like there is a bee in the car, you're trying to drive, but you have this thing that can actually really pretty much cause an accident at any time. Whether it really is a threat or not is not the major issue. It is the perception of threat that is the issue.
Right.
I think my most traumatic bee experience is the clip from the Wicker Man remake. It's like, oh God, terrible. So much. Or
I mean, look at there was a recent one on a channel, a wildlife channel that has been done over here, where the guy decides to do a bee beard, and of course the bees end up starting to sting him as he gets to the beard, and he ends up looking like well, of course he swells up, so he looks extremely deformed after the video ends. And of course, videos like that, people see this and then they just expect the worst when it comes to these types of things.
Right. Well, that place, you're talking about an accident, though. It's like the driver flailing his arms and looking all around. That's going to cause an accident.
It's like Tommy Boy. It's like, okay, so we're driving drunk. The cops are on us. What do we do? Okay, it's only work once. We got to go for it.
I remember one of our
field bees.
I remember one of our.
I'm allergic too. We'll come back and check on you, and they fucking leave.
I remember one of our neighbors had a collie, and she was stung one time, like 47 times, and she survived. In fact, the news people came out and recorded her story because she was a survivor of this big all-out bee attack, and I was like,
dang,
yeah.
But anyway, so getting back to our conclusion. So thinking she's escaped, So earlier in the scene, she called her father's lawyer for help, and instead of just sending her the money for the stupid plane ticket home, he was like, "Oh no, I'll come out there myself, like a moron." And so he shows up and
Yeah.
to see her, flounder out of the water, and it's like, "Oh, okay, I'm safe." And then out of nowhere, like his head gets cut off, like
Right.
still alive. So the inspector like roughed her up pretty good, but she's still alive. Like she says she killed the inspector, and it's kind of like, oh man, I liked him. But she's basically trying to chop Jennifer's head off with this like piece of sheet metal that she's brought with her. And then out of nowhere, like the chimp with the straight razor just jumps on her and like saves her ass. So it has the craziest ending.
That wasn't the inspector though. That was the lawyer. The
inspector got decapitated. The lawyer got decapitated. The inspector was still like partially chained up.
Right.
Like we saw the inspector, he was like on top of Frau Bruckner, just like hitting her with his chains, like trying to stop her from going after Jennifer. But apparently Bruckner got the better of him in that exchange. And so she has her like throat and face like slashed up by the chimp with the straight razor. And then pretty much the movie ends. It was a fairly wild ride. So, I mean, overall, like the plot, I felt the plot was just like awesome in terms of like all like it was almost like a collection of set pieces, but this time they actually went together very well and made sense. So, what were your impressions of the story?
It depends on the cut, but if we're talking the one that we've all kind of got together with the 110, I thought that the plot actually did go together pretty well. It held together. It dragged points, but to me, other than that, I thought the pacing was actually pretty good, at least at this particular juncture. I thought that it kept us entertained, in the loop, and didn't drown us out in the details too much.
All right, what about you, Jake?
Yes. I mean, yeah, like I said, I think it went pretty well.
I would have to agree. I mean, I don't think the pacing was at all slow for me. I mean, the scene by scene, every scene kind of counted for something. So,
there were really dead moments.
Yeah, it's not like it was a terribly long movie either. I mean, just shy of 2 hours. It's not, it's not too bad.
It's kind of a long movie though.
And you're only missing 6 minutes, so.
Right. Which, from the sound of it, that's kind of like your typical deleted scenes collection from what I'm hearing for that extra 6 minutes.
Creeper cut, it's pretty substantial, but for like that 6 minutes, it's mostly just like an extra 10 seconds like here and there, from how it's been described to me at least. So moving on the characters, so we kind of touched on everybody like as they were introduced in the plot. So, but I'm just gonna start with like Jennifer's character. She's supposed to be some kind of like representation of purity from some of the stuff I read. It's like, did you guys notice that she's like always wearing white? And even when she falls into like the pit of like death, like as she's climbing out, like a pipe like washes her off.
She did have that overcoat that was rather darker. And I know it was borrowed from another character, basically, but yeah. But you're right. Generally, she had some sort of like a white dress or something. Huh.
And she did have that that top that roommate had borrowed. The one time when she went out to see her boyfriend.
Yeah, which they even commented on the movie. It's like that might have gotten her killed because the killer might have thought it was her.
Could be, yeah.
That was a thing I read about in one of the. I think so. I have two versions of this movie. So I have the Steelbook put out by Arrow. And the Steelbook put out by Synapse. And so I think I read about the purity thing in the booklet that came with the Synapse Steelbook. And after having like seen it again, I was like, oh yeah, I kind of noticed that.
Well, and actually, that's like a long-running motif with horror, which, of course, they have it explicitly explained in the Scream franchises, the whole, the virginity aspect and all that kind of stuff, and the part where Sophie changes and you see like her back's to the camera, but she does change in front of the camera. You're like, oh, she's dead. It's like. But not to mention that she snuck out to be with her boyfriend when she was supposed to be watching Jennifer, make sure she didn't sleepwalk.
Yep.
So
She sleepwalks.
Yeah.
I have to watch her to make sure she doesn't sleepwalk. And then like Jennifer sleepwalks like right after she sneaks out.
right, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, moving right along. So Dr. McGregor, I thought was a pretty cool character. Like Donald Pleasance played him really well with a lot of like dignity. And
Oh, yeah.
I kind of would have liked to have seen more of him because it was fun like hearing him like try to explain like the science of the insect science that like the little actual science that they had to work with.
He sold it with his portrayal. It made it sound better than it necessarily was,
Yeah, kind of like Christopher Lee. We were talking a little bit on the pre-show about how Christopher Lee could just take anything and, just put that voice into it. So there was a story. One of my favorite stories for Christopher Lee was I heard this on the Howling 3 extras. So when they did Howling 2, which Christopher Lee was in with the same director, the producer of that sent him ape suits from Planet of the Apes when he was like, hey, we're doing a werewolf movie. We need werewolf costumes. And when the producer did that, the director was like, hey, these are monkey suits. I need wolves. And the producer was like, well, you're smart. You'll figure it out. And Christopher Lee overheard this and he was like, okay, I got something. So shoot a close-up of me and I'll explain that as a man transforms into a werewolf, at some point along he becomes an ape. So we'll save it this way. So, like that same kind of creative delivery of just any bullshit, I think applied to Donald Pleasance too. He doesn't say anything as ridiculous, but
I would say so. Yeah. Actually, if I remember correctly, I think some of the stuff that Loomis said was kind of iffy as well. And you're right; it like just has to do with how he put it forward. Yeah. But
Damn it, he's
anyway.
got you doing it too.
What happened?
Loomis.
No.
Calling him Loomis.
No. I was doing that on purpose. Like I was talking about Donald Pleasance roles. Yeah.
So anything else? Any other character stuff we want to comment on? For anybody, go nuts.
Well, there wasn't.
Okay,
go ahead.
Oh.
I was going to say, I don't know if I just lost track of it or whatever. Did they really go into? Did anything really happen with the others, the headmistress or anyone at the school, or did they just kind of disappear?
They were just kind
lost track of that. Okay, yeah.
Like, the headmistress was there to be mean to Jennifer.
Well,
yeah.
and the lawyer did go, and the family lawyer because evidently her father was a rich actor.
Right.
So he went over to the school to look for her, and that's the last that we see of the school headmistress.
Okay.
So.
Oh, there you are, guillotine.
So,
yeah.
But that is the last that you do see.
Yeah.
Although, how did he know to come?
Movie logic kind of thing, I think.
How did he know to come to the school?
Well, yeah, because
she had Frau Bruckner, and then he would have had to have gone out there.
She had,
okay.
Because she had asked for some money to be sent, and when she went and asked for the money, it wasn't there. So how did he know to come?
Well,
maybe they intended to come all along.
And he was like, I won't give you money, but I'll come pick you up.
Yeah.
You just didn't tell her about it first.
Right.
It's like, why send money when you could just do it yourself?
Exactly. Because
True.
you just can't trust those wire transfers because they could take forever, and you never know if they really go through and what have you. But anyway,
Any more character notes?
well, it is probably worth noting that yes, her father was this famous actor, and there was a little bit of interesting off-color humor with her roommate being like very, very much in love with him, that sort of thing.
It's like, well, of
But
course, Paul
What
Corvino or whatever. Of course,
It
I
was
know.
a-
Paul Corvino, I think it was, yeah.
what
Roommate's
place?
like, have you been to bed with him? And it's like, he's my dad. And she's like,
yeah.
What place was the investigator in when he was asking the questions about the mental hospital? Was it?
there was a
in-
nearby mental hospital where, so the full story
Yeah.
was Frau Bruckner, I guess, had worked there before, and somebody broke in and like assaulted her, and that's where her son comes from. And they go.
Oh,
The inspector goes there like looking for clues as to the identity of the maniac.
yeah.
Okay.
But it's kind of it didn't seem to. I feel like I missed some stuff in that scene because it didn't seem to contribute a whole lot. Like I think it was there to show that that his character was actually investigating the murders.
Well,
Like
yeah,
more
they
time with
didn't entirely flesh that part of it out, did they?
not really, no.
Yeah. Yeah, I think your synopsis there actually gave me more than I got from the scene itself. It's
It was
kind of sad, but
it's an excuse to play a Motorhead song and like show the creepy looking inmates.
Well, yeah, that's
Mhm.
another thing. The music. I mean,
Oh, we are getting to the music. We are saving that.
okay.
Anyway,
All
like,
right,
Special effects then.
I think we kind of hit on the other characters
right.
in the plot synopsis. So moving on to special effects, I thought the effects in
Mhm.
those were pretty good. Like most of them were really convincing.
Mhm.
Like, would you
Well,
guys?
those fly scenes were amazing, and the even though it grossed me out a lot, the head that they showed with the maggots on it.
Yeah.
This had some really nice body parts. Well,
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yeah. The probably the cheesiest effects were the insect effects, but even those were decent for the time.
Yeah,
You know,
you know what they did with the insect with like the cloud of insects?
it was like coffee grounds, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I remember somewhere in the Arrow, I remember that they supposedly even just like painted them on like a few frames.
Mm.
Well,
Yeah.
and I specifically like the scene where all the insects were going wild in McGregor's office, and he's like,
Right.
"I've never seen this happen before." And then a
Mhm.
few minutes later, they were all calm, and he's like, "Your presence must have calmed them."
I kind of wonder how they did that effect. Like
Yeah.
just like shake the tanks and then like go, you know?
Could be. Yeah. That
All
was very interesting how they did that.
Well,
the stabbings were pretty good. Like they were all believable.
yeah.
That body pit too. I think the body pit was like I think one of the ingredients they had in that thing was like chocolate milk or something.
Yeah.
It looked pretty gross though.
I could believe that. Yeah.
Chocolate milk with maggot larvae.
Oh god.
Actually, I think I read I think I read something like some of the larvae that they were looking at they like used vermiculite or something along those lines. Like
Yeah,
they
that sounds right.
they did a pretty good job of creating something that looked believable-ish. They did. Yeah. Hmm.
Supposedly, after they finish this up, they just let the flies go, and then they like died off in winter.
Mm.
Or at least that was one of the things that I heard.
So they just were filmed to die.
Well, I mean, they're flies. They only live like a few weeks anyway, right?
Yeah.
These
Depending
are
on the species, obviously, but
Sounds
still.
about right.
Anything else on effects before we get to the main event?
Not particularly.
The kills were not terrible when it came to the stabbings and stuff like that. I mean, of course, I just recently finished watching Can't Blood Kills, which is a compilation of pretty much all the kills and sexy scenes in the movies. And of course, I thought that these particular kills in this movie were pretty good, especially when I had other things to compare to. And pretty realistic. I mean, those stabbings and stuff like that.
Even at the end when the kid gets his face eaten off, like that effect worked pretty good too. Like we see him underwater, and it's just like red and like stripped down to the muscle, and it's like, wow, that's a pretty good effect.
And after she kicks him away from when she's underwater, he just becomes. When he surfaces, the flames engulf him. So to me, seeing that effect right afterwards was pretty cool too.
Yeah,
pretty badass. So
yeah, and the scene of the firefly too. Like I think they painted that firefly into the negative or something because it was kind of a really glowy firefly. Like they did a painting of that scene, and that was used in the waxwork vinyl release. I think it's on the cover, which I don't know if we can use that as like thumbnails or something for this, but we should get some pictures of that because it is a gorgeous vinyl jacket.
Good deal.
Yeah, but moving on to the music. So what's so cool about the music with this is that Phenomena has like this bizarre mix of like licensed music from like bands and then the traditional like Goblin soundtrack that Argento uses in like every movie. So
particularly Motorhead and
Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden, Motorhead, and some weird thing called Andy Six Gang. It's like I'm not exactly sure.
And you see, for me, I admit I'm one of those people who was not really super impressed by the Goblin soundtracks and the other movies, just because to me it sounds like every other horror movie soundtrack when I hear Goblin playing, which is good and bad in that sense. I mean, it's just all about your opinion. But I did really like the intermix of the other themes, especially the themes that they were using when they were ramping it up, the kind of almost harder rock theme that they threw in there. I thought that was really good.
Yeah,
it really did play to the feeling.
Yeah, that title, the title track, which is just Phenomena, like that's what's playing during the scene where she follows like the lightning bug to the glove. And I think that's my favorite piece of music from this movie because it's like
my favorite piece is called Jennifer.
It's very it's complicated and loud and fast paced, and I think that piece is somewhat like that too, right? Or is that the slower theme, Dave?
I believe it's the slower theme, if I remember correctly. It's just the whole soundtrack to any Argento films that has Goblin in it is to me always sounds awesome. You know, I mean, you can't Goblin to me can't really go wrong. To me, I have to disagree with you Brandon, because I don't think that Goblin sounds like any other 80s horror film.
They sound like Goblin.
Right. But
they sound like Goblin.
Well, again, that's why we have different people on here. They all sound similar in one way or another. And,
I honestly thought as well that it sounded a little bit like something I'd heard before, but for me, again, it kind of came down to how the music was used. This is why I'm such a big pusher for giving more credit to how music is used and not getting so hung up on whether it's original or not, because the music was it was used very well. Even if it wasn't the most original score, and I'm not sure it was, it was well suited to what they wanted, and the mixture of the rock songs in there, they did a really good job of it. There were a couple scenes where I thought maybe they were a little bombastic on the music and they could have reined it in a little, but for the most part, it was pretty awesome.
Like, I think an example of that is actually the Firefly scene, because the phenomena scene itself is like very busy and very loud, and it's just like the sound of chaos. And the scene that they're using it for is just Jennifer calmly walking toward a bush. It's like, I feel like there should be like utter pandemonium. Like,
I do have to say that
theme. Like, you can find it here on YouTube, guys. Like, go listen to it when we're done. Like,
I do have to say that this particular soundtrack is more distinct than some of the other soundtracks that Goblin has made for some of the other films. But I have to say my favorite soundtrack is Suspiria.
Suspiria is such a strong classic. I mean, it's very hard to beat.
Well, we're going to be getting back to that one pretty soon. So
we're doing that next week. Next week we're doing a double shot. So we're going to somewhat revisit the original Suspiria for the sake of comparing it to new Suspiria.
For those who want or need a copy, I suppose I could do the original one as well, but and send it to you guys. But I think every single one of us at least has a copy of it. So
yeah, see them both. While you're waiting for us to come on next week, guys. Anyway, so with the metal was kind of interestingly used, because we have Motorhead's Locomotive play. Like, they play it for when they discover Dr. McGregor's body, like the ambulance is like wheeling him off, and then when the inspector goes to the asylum and like asks some questions. And it was kind of a odd pick, I thought, for that scene. What did you guys think of that?
Oh, I love the Motorhead parts in this, but that's just to me.
Motorhead.
I don't know. I felt like it went well with just having it. This particular theme, having it intermixed with sort of that classic 80s horror soundtrack, I just thought it brought out a lot more in this than just having it straight out.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh yeah, I get it. Like, it definitely punctuated some moments. Like, it made some things like really pop. Like the very first moment that we get, we're gonna segue into favorite scenes, I think, here. Like, does anybody have any favorite notes on score, except for the Iron Maiden song, which I'm about to talk about? No? All right. So my favorite scene overlaps with the use of music in this, because my favorite scene is the first murder. So the way the first murder is set up and this whole thing really gets started is this tourist, she gets lost separated from her tour bus, and she's kind of like wandering around, like looking for like a phone or like help or something. And she comes across this house that's kind of like a ways off the road. So she's knocking on the door, and we can see someone inside like pulling at chains and eventually ripping them out of the wall. And then she's immediately attacked with a pair of scissors. And as she's being chased by the mysterious killer with this pair of scissors, my brain sort of added to the scene a little bit, I think, but they play Iron Maiden's Flash of the Blade. And I love that scene because it's kind of like everything I like in horror. Like, it's got a lot of energy to it, and it's grim and nasty, but also can be interpreted in like a really funny way almost. So it's just, you'll die as you live in a flash of the blade. And then he's just like, you can just see like sharp objects like swinging at people. And it's like, oh shit. And like, I loved that. And it really kind of set the tone for, what it's going to be like when like the murders happen. And they use it again like near the end, after Jennifer's realized who the killer is. And she's been locked in a room and she's trying to escape, while the killer is going after the inspector. And it seemed kind of out of place there, but I really loved it, like in that first scene. Although on rewatching it, it was like, oh, my brain imagined a lot of stuff that doesn't actually happen in this scene because I just like the song and the idea so much. It's go with Brandon. What was your favorite scene, Brandon?
I had a number of them that I thought were entertaining, but I think the favorite at the end was at the end where she comes back and everything comes back into place with the whole foreshadowing earlier with the chimpanzee and finding his sharp objects or her sharp objects to play with, and coming back and actually taking out the bad guy at the end of that.
That was pretty cool. And like nobody saw it coming either. It's like, why is there a monkey in this? Oh, the monkey matters. Okay. Well, chimp.
Definitely good choice of foreshadowing in that.
Setups and payoffs. How about you, Jake?
I guess favorite scenes might be that one with the insects, the ones where they're all crazy and then they get calmed. I think maybe, or at least some of those early scenes with Jennifer and Dr. McGregor. Those are probably my favorite. I don't know that there were any particular one that really jumped out though.
Well, they were all pretty good, like character building scenes. We find out Dr. McGregor had an assistant that he was very fond of, who was taken by the killer, and so you get a lot of humanization of our main characters in this. Like they're fairly developed, which is really nice.
Right.
Like the people who die, it's just like, hey, here's my name, wham. But that was one of the movie's strong points, was that additional layer to its main characters. And how about we cap it off with you, Dave?
Oh well, my favorite scene would have to be the part where the lawyer's head just got chopped off, and it looks like Jennifer is about to get her head chopped off, when all of a sudden the ape steps in and stabs the shit out of the killer. So to me, that alone is kind of a priceless scene for me. But my other favorite scene is the part where the flies end up being controlled and attack the smaller killer,
murder child,
a murder child, the grotesque looking freak of nature, and then of course he gets a bonfire of his own making. So.
The hell of a finale.
The Jason in the lake scene, So.
Well, hopefully he doesn't come back, because that thing was creepy. Anyway, well, I think that's probably it. You guys got anything else you want to say about Phenomena before we wrap up?
The only thing I would like to say, and that is, when it comes to the different types, there were 3 different cuts to this film. Of course, I really didn't think that the longest of the version, the 116-minute version, had a lot more to say about it. But I do believe that the 110-minute was good at explaining things. And but still, if you're looking for a quick watch and you're not needing a lot of explanation as to what's going on, I think that Creepers is a good way to go. At the end of the day, 89 minutes
too. Yeah. I'm sorry, I accidentally cut you off. Were you finished, or?
Yeah, I'm just pointing out it was 89 minutes as well, which also helps.
Yeah, I thought the Creepers cut was actually pretty good too. Like I expected it to be like really. I expected it to like really not work, but I was kind of happy with it. I guess that would be kind of my final thought on it too. So, because I have the Arrow Steelbook, which only has the 116-minute version, and the Synapse Steelbook, which has all 3 versions. I think the extras on the Arrow Steel actually are better, even though a lot of them are in like Italian, and you have to like read subtitles for like 2 hours. But I don't know. So I think the 3 cuts are maybe almost equivalent in terms of quality. Like the Creepers cut like so much better than I expected it to be, because this was the first time I saw that cut. So I'd agree with you, Brandon, that if you want to just see like kind of a truncated version of this, go for Creepers. Otherwise, I think I'd probably just recommend the 110, because the 116, like some of the scenes that they added in there, were never actually like dubbed into English. So there's like a little bit of dialogue that's like still Italian that they couldn't quite fix. So go for the 110-minute version, unless you're like really in a hurry.
Believe it or not, I believe on one of those Mill Creek 50 packs, I believe there is a copy of the original Creepers on one of those Mill Creek. For those of you who collected the Mill Creek 50 packs.
Weirdos.
Random thing. I watched, of course, an English version of it. I did not watch the original. But I find it interesting that apparently most of the original cast did the redub for the film, if I understand correctly. So that helps explain why some of the dubbing is very stilted.
Oh yeah, it shows when the dialogue is dubbed. It's like, oh god, they like knock you in the face.
Right. I mean, obviously, some of them sound perfectly natural, and some of them are, yeah.
Well, dubbing definitely been perfected over time.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I wish that they would come out with a totally big box set with all of the Godzillas with the original VHS spaced apart lip syncing things, because that was the funniest part of watching
Godzilla MST3K edition.
the part where the lips would be talking way after the words.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so I think we're at pretty good episode time here. So why don't we call it a day?
Okay. Sounds good.
So we're gonna just go into our typical things and sign off. So I'm gonna go first. So I'm Dustin, also known as the Crypt of Horrors on Twitter. I have my own channel on YouTube, also the Crypt of Horrors, and an Instagram for my horror collection. So I'm a horror collector living here in Milwaukee. DHR Hunter is my Instagram for the collection. So follow it and browbeat me to posting stuff, because I'm pretty lazy on that. So I got some new videos coming up pretty soon. So I just wrapped a fairly difficult semester here in town, and I can actually pay attention to doing horror stuff online again. So it's gonna be a good summer. I hope. So, and if any of you of my followers on Twitter are listening, thanks for coming and showing your support. Like, share, and subscribe, and let me know how we can do this better. So, yeah. Let's pass it on to Brandon, and I'm gonna step out for a minute.
Okay, well, I run a channel called Septum Sen versus the World, so I also go by Septum Sen, and we are all about physical media on Septum Sen versus the World. We appreciate the collection of physical media, showing pickups, and of course release information for those of you who want to know what's going to be coming out for the next week. We are on top of that for you. Of course, we also do various reviews of movies. We actually have a number of those coming out, and I have two actually coming out in the near future. One for an anime series, and the other for the Blood release, Camp Blood Kills, which will come out next week. So we're all looking forward to that. And of course, we have a two-part top 10 episode, one last week and then the other for this Friday, all about anime that has influenced us in our lives and our collecting.
Over to you.
Okay. I'm Kotobuki Jake. I also frequently guest on Septum Sin versus the World. And we have had some pretty fun videos of late. We'll have more coming up, of course. And as he said, we've got a two-part, the anime that influenced us, and his went last week. Mine is upcoming. it should be, and this is, of course, part 1 of 2. We have the early, and then we will have the later coming up later next month, I guess. And I, of course, have my own channel, Kotobuki Jake, which is dedicated to nature and the natural world. I also do have a Hub Pages page, which is very rarely updated, but there is stuff on there. And yeah, that'll do for now. And Dave?
I am David Strege. I normally run this channel and host it. But over time, every single one of us has become part of that shish kebab of sorts.
Everyone's a winner.
In any case, I am currently just started production on a film called Death Ward, which is by the same director of A Wrestle Massacre. And currently I'm working on transferring all of my views over to Delusions of Grandeur. So head over to that channel, which is up on YouTube, and check out the new intro that I've been putting with those. And I believe Septim and Jake are going to be contributing some views shortly. So look out for those as well. So thank you for listening. Like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy the podcast, folks. Next week we have Suspiria, correct?
Yeah, we've got the new Suspiria, and we are probably going to end up touching on the old Suspiria because we sort of have to discuss the new Suspiria. So they are, they have like the same. Well, if anybody's listened to our Suspiria review from before, the original Suspiria is sort of light on plot and high on like execution. Yeah, no, I said that wrong. The original Suspiria is high on flash and low on plot. The new Suspiria is really heavy on plot with not a whole lot of flash until like the last 20 minutes, which is just insane. But we'll talk about that next week.
Most definitely.
So, I mean,
Good times.
it's basically just it takes the idea. The new Suspiria takes the idea of the original Suspiria and just does something, and just does more with it. So, yeah.
So definitely keep
Right.
up for that episode. We'll have more in store for you as the month plays out. So thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Say goodnight, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Go listen to the soundtrack.
Yeah.